enough, causing me at my old age to chase this man, okay?
Oh my God.
Not very far, mind you, but Jerry chased him and said, I better catch this man before the lieutenant kills me. If we had secured this individual initially, we wouldn't have run into the problem.
I could tell you for the next 2 hours what it's like to be a police officer, but you will never know until you actually do it yourself and place somebody under arrest or get into a pursuit or get in a fight, because that badge carries a lot of weight.
2800 block of 9th Street, cover that position.
Things can turn at any moment's notice because of the violence and the weapons that are in the neighborhood and because of the drug-related crime. Okay, no problem. How's everybody doing? We're here just to look for some drugs and clean up the bad people off the street. You don't mind that, do you? Yeah, I gotta go arrest somebody.
In this podcast, I had the opportunity to interview one of the legends in the police world. Very first Cops episode, Jerry Wurms. He brought a different light to what proactive policing was, his way to communicate, his way to talk to people, his understanding of the community that he worked. It just brought a different philosophy and mindset to policing. Back in the day, you didn't have a lot of social media or opportunities to get outside of your department training or outside of your area training unless you had a very proactive administration. And if that didn't happen, you kind of led through each other. And I think Cops shed a different light back in the day and gave you a different opportunity to see what policing was if your agency wasn't doing it. And it was such a humbling honor to have him on the podcast. I never thought that I would have the ability to talk to the dude, let alone have him on the podcast. And we texted, and he allowed me to make a shirt of him. It's just truly, truly humbling. And to have someone that still loves the policing community, loves his time that he spent in policing, and is a great ambassador for proactive policing. I loved having him on. We had a great discussion. I could have talked to him for a long time, but I try to keep these about an hour. I think we went maybe an hour and a half. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What keeps you motivated to stay proactive and get bad guys off the street?
The facts is a big cannon against a little tiny gun of opinions, because we've all heard people give us their opinions.
Let's talk about how easy it is to get narcotics in this country.
Once they're in this country, anywhere within 2 days, the drugs will be in our cities.
Because we know knowledge is power.
All right, today we're here on Beyond the Barrel with the infamous Jerry Wurms from the very first Cops episode ever. And everyone knows that story. So this episode, we're going to talk about a lot of things besides that.
Okay.
I appreciate you having you. It's truly a humbling honor to have you on the podcast. When I made this shirt, I never thought that I would have the opportunity to talk to you. But I kind of got your blessing with it. So, and then to have you here on the podcast is almost surreal.
Well, I enjoy doing these podcasts, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Before we dive into it, I know that you're new to social media, and did you have any idea of the support within the community that you had, or were you just completely oblivious until you kind of got social media?
I had no idea because I wasn't on any social media whatsoever, and my wife is on all the different social medias. And this, I guess, about 5 months ago, she started seeing these memes about me, like little clips that they took out from Cops, and the infamous line, stop or I'll shoot you in the back. That became very popular. And then, he's got nunchucks. This one guy was talking about the nunchucks, and, so they were just taking little bits from Cops and throwing these memes together. So my wife saw this and she said, "Hey, Jerry, they're doing all these memes about you." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't know." So she showed me some of them. And then I guess she contacted Mike from Copville. So
Okay.
she direct messaged him and said, "Hey, I'm Jerry Worms' wife. So I just wanted to let you know we're watching this stuff and what's going on. What are you doing?" And then he said, "Hey, do you think you could talk to Jerry and maybe he'd call me?" And she said, yeah, give me your number. So I wound up calling Mike, and we started talking, and we just hit it off. We just were bullshitting for a good hour, and he wanted to get some pictures of me, so I kind of texted him some pictures, and then that's how that I guess the baseball card started. They made a baseball card of me, my rookie picture, and then that just took off. And so naturally, I had to join Instagram, and I didn't even know how to do it, so I had to have my son help me, because I'm technically challenged when it comes to that stuff. So so he taught me about Instagram and all that, and then all of a sudden I started getting all these people wanting to follow me, and I got like 850 something followers now, and I'm like,
Amazing.
yeah, I'm just kind of blown away by this. So it's kind of interesting.
Do you get private messages just talking?
Yeah, I get some private messages. Some of them are kind of bullshit. I had a guy asking me for money the other day, actually.
Jesus.
Yeah. So most of them are pretty legitimate. This is the part I enjoy. A lot of these young guys, I'm talking about guys that are in their 20s, so they never saw the original Cops until they started these memes, and then I guess now on YouTube you can watch all the original episodes that were, like 39 years ago. So they're watching some of these episodes, and then they start talking about police work, and they actually direct message me and ask me for advice and tell them they talk about their life a little, and everybody that messages me, I always make it a point to write them back. So I built up a little following of, I guess I'm like Uncle Jerry or Grandpa Jerry now.
That's amazing. I love it. And I think I know we're going way off here, but as time goes on, the retired guys kind of lose the connection to active guys. And what happens is there's this loss of knowledge, loss of experience. And I'm not talking about even like on the street. It's just how the policing works with the inner department politics of it and things like those lines. So the further those retired guys get away, they have, I don't know, the retired guys that we have that still come around, they kind of missed it. They missed the camaraderie. And then the young guys are missing out on understanding how to navigate the politics of a police department effectively.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine when I started, I started back in '86. There was no technology at all, nothing. No cell phones, no beepers, none of the, body cameras, nothing. So all you had was a radio, either a nightstick, no pepper spray, no tasers, no asps, but I had nunchucks. And so my department allowed, that you had nunchucks. You had to take a 20-hour class. And I went right for it because, as you know, at that time, I was working nights. You got to have a flashlight. So we had the big stream lights, not the little stream lights that they have now or the stingers, but these lights were like, this big. And so you're getting out of your car. Our radios were in a charger. So you had to pop the radio out. You had to grab your flashlight. You had to grab a nightstick, so you're doing all this stuff before you get out of the car. So what was good about the nunchucks is that they folded in half. They always were on your belt with you. So that's one less thing that you had to, jump with. And that's why I went for the nunchucks right away.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, a mag light would be the same as a nightstick. Similar effectiveness, I guess, if you needed it.
Well, the nunchucks are much more effective than a nightstick because there's so many different things you can do with them besides strike somebody. I used probably 80% of the time I used nunchucks, I used them as come-along holds, where I'd slip them on their wrist, and then you squeeze down, put their arms behind their back, and when you're hitting that radial nerve, they became very cooperative.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's even, probably not based on policing today, but I wonder if that's even an allowed or an acceptable tool.
I don't know. I mean, in our department, we had a guy named Joe Hess, who was, he actually was the world karate champion at one point. He was a New Jersey cop, and he came to Florida, and he taught at the academy. And that's where I got to meet him. And he would, after you graduated from the academy, you could take his 20-hour nunchuck class. And I signed up for it, and I took it on my own time. I wanted to do it.
That's amazing. All right, let's backtrack a lot now because we went through some cool stuff. But when were you born? What year?
I was born in 1955, and I just turned 70 last Sunday.
Amazing. Happy birthday, belated.
Thank you.
At what age did you want to be the police, or was there exterior factors that led you to kind of that, or were you the kid that grew up that always played cops and robbers and always wanted to be the cop?
Well, I had the influence of my father, who, also he was in the military. He was in World War II, and then he was in the Navy Reserves for 20-something years. And then he started out as a cop in Washington, D.C. as a beat cop. And then from there, he became the first organization to form federal narcotics agents. They were called T-men under the Treasury Department. So he left, when they first started this federal narcotic agency, he was one of the first guys ever hired. And that was in Washington, D.C. That's where I was born, in Washington, D.C. Then my father transitioned from the Treasury Department. It came into the Justice Department, and it was called BNDD, Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. That transitioned into DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration. So my father, had that history, and he got transferred a lot. I moved 7 times as a kid. I went to 2 different elementary schools, 2 different high schools, 2 different middle schools, because every time he got promoted, we got transferred. So I lived in California, lived in New Jersey, New York, Washington, Maryland, those areas. It was an interesting life being, transferred around, but, obviously that had an influence on me, him being in law enforcement. So when I graduated, I was in college in South Florida, and I was going to a school called Nova University, and I graduated there with a business degree. And I actually applied to the sheriff's office in Broward back then. Went through the hiring process, got accepted to go into the academy. And this was back in 77. And when I lived in New Jersey for like 7 years, John Travolta was one of my childhood friends. He actually dated my sister, and we became good friends. Well, his career obviously, took off. And he used to always call me, he was in Hollywood, and, hey, why don't you come out here and, we'll do something and get you a job. And I said, man, I don't want to come out and be some hanger-on groupie guy. I want a legitimate job. So I hadn't heard from him in months, and I was about to start the academy. And then he was in New York doing a promotional tour for the opening of Saturday Night Fever, the movie, that made him a star, basically. And he called me and said, hey, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm going to start the police academy next month. He goes, oh, no, I got a real legitimate job for you. And I go, what is it? And he goes, no, my manager really needs help now. He's getting very busy. He's got all these working actors, and my career's taken off. So out of a whim, I just said, I talked to his manager. I said, okay. So I called up the police academy and I said, I'm not going in. And I packed up all my stuff and drove cross country in 3 days and started working for his manager. And then his career took off even more. And then I wound up working for him. He formed his own production company, and I was in charge of trying to find projects for him and reading, 6 or 7 scripts every week and meeting with other writers and producers. And I had an office on the Waterbunners lot in Burbank, California. And things went a little sour with him after a while. He went through some changes, and our friendship kind of didn't last like it should have. And I wound up on my own. He closed his company, and I just became an independent, guy that worked on different music videos and movies. I worked on, so I worked on a movie called Blame It on the Night, and John Langley, who was the original producer of Cops, with a guy named Malcolm Barber, we became friends. We worked on this movie. So after the movie, it's over. And the thing about Hollywood, everyone thinks, oh man, you're working in Hollywood, you got such a great life. When you're an independent guy working on all these different projects, you work on a project for like 3 months. When the project's over, you're out of work. You got to hustle another job. So I was getting tired of that life of working, making decent money, and then living off your savings till you get your next job. Because you're still paying rent, still paying insurance, still paying car payment, and it's like you're living on your savings all the time. And I wasn't getting ahead. And then when I was working with John Langley, we came up with this project called The Doping of a Nation. And we presented it to Tribune Broadcasting. They loved the idea. However, they said, we have a development deal with Geraldo Rivera. But if you want to do this project, Geraldo's going to be the host. Well, when you're out of work, what do you say? Okay, we'll take the job. So we took the job. My job was, I was one of the associate producers, and my job was to contact all the police agencies we were going to film with, because crack was exploding. This is like in 85, 86. So we did filming all over the country with different police departments. And so I would make contact with the departments and say, we want to do this, that. We were, filming all these different things with Geraldo. So we went to Broward because through my father's connection, he knew the sheriff at the time. His name was Nick Navarro. Navarro and my father worked together back in New York when they were both, he worked for the DEA also.
Who's tired of beard oil that overpromises and underdelivers? We have partnered with Semper Suave, the best oil in the game. Keeps you looking great on duty and off duty. Kind of hides my gray a little bit. Keeps me looking a little fresh and clean in between trips to the barber shop. Not only is it military owned, but it's also law enforcement owned. So we are full supporters of Semper Suave. And if you want to support them too, use the code BEYOND15 for 15% off. They love us. They're going to love you just the same.
So he made the introduction. So my father called Navarro and said, hey, my son's coming to Broward. What can you do for him? So I went down and met with Nick Navarro. I had this laundry list of like 20 different things I wanted Geraldo to do, like put him undercover, have him buy crack, buy a kilo of coke, all these crazy things I wanted to do. And I was like, well, if I can get him to do like 5 of them, I'd be happy. So I took Navarro out to dinner and he agreed to everything. Wow. I was like, are you kidding me? He was the most cooperative guy in the world. So we started doing a lot of filming in Broward because he was so cooperative. We actually put Geraldo, dressed him up undercover at a hotel. We had a connecting room. The room was wired. It was also videotaped in a hidden camera. And he bought a kilo of cocaine from a drug dealer.
Unreal.
So, yeah. So we filmed all this, and the show was a big hit called The Doping of a Nation. Well, while we were filming the show, I started to get that bug again about being a cop, because I was around cops for 6 months doing all this filming. And I started to say to myself, you know what? This show's going to be over and I'm going to be out of work again. So all the guys in Broward, we were working with this drug unit, and they said, hey, Jerry, they handed me an application. And I said, hey, you'd be a good cop. We know that, your dad was a cop and all this stuff. So I actually filled out the application. I was going through the hiring process while I was doing this show. So I made contact with the human resource director. She was very cooperative because I was flying all over the country. So I said, hey, I'm going to be back in Broward like in 3 weeks. Can you arrange my physical? And then I'm going to come back in another couple of weeks. Can you do my psych? Can you do this? So all during the filming, I was actually going through the hiring process. So
that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah. So then that ended. The show ended, and I went back to California, and I was out of work. So, looking, for another project to do. And they called me and said, you're hired. Start the academy in January. So I said, man, okay. Then once again, packed up all my stuff and went back to Florida. And wow. And then I went to the police academy and didn't really know anybody except the guys that I'd met. But, they were already busy. You don't really know or work with those guys until you graduate. So I graduated, and then John Langley and Malcolm Barber, who did Cops, came up with the show of Cops. And, so it was basically kind of like the Geraldo show without Geraldo, So they pitched the idea to Navarro. Navarro was all for it again. And they came down to Florida and did the pilot show. And naturally, I was working in a very high drug, high crime area. So they figured we'll stick a camera with Jerry, a cameraman and a sound man with Jerry, because he knows what we need to do. I don't need to put a producer with him. So they put these guys with me and they rode with me for weeks. And Cops was born that way. They shot the pilot, which was an hour. They also filmed other units. I don't know if you saw the original pilot show, but they did other units. And then they went back to Fox, who was producing it, and Fox said, okay, can you do 13 episodes? So then they said, yeah. So then this was like 6 months after the pilot show aired. So then they came back to Florida and did the first 13 episodes of Cops in Florida.
Wow. When did you want to work that area, or just being a new guy were you stuck working in that area?
I was assigned that area. I mean, and I'm glad I was, because I figured if I could survive and be in an area like that, then I can work anywhere.
No, yeah, no. And most new guys kind of get that, but some guys are they want that area, like, so they can kind of volunteer for it. I was just curious if you were assigned it or not.
Well, they just, when you came out of the academy, they had whatever district was shorthanded, because we had 17 different districts, so a huge agency. So whatever district was short, usually the unincorporated districts is where, that's where I worked. They were usually shorthanded. So I came fresh out of the academy, went right into a 6-week FTO program, 2 weeks on midnights, 2 weeks on afternoons, 2 weeks on days, and cut you loose.
Wow. FTO is now like 3 months minimum.
Yeah, mine was 6 weeks.
Crazy.
So
you said your dad started off as a DC cop. What year was that?
That was in the 50s.
So he was there during the civil rights movement and all that stuff? Yeah,
he was the original DC cop working. They didn't even have radios. He told me they had a call box. So every hour, so he would have a beat that he walked. And every hour he had to go to that call box and call in to, let him know that he's okay.
Ironically, there's another handler in the same association. We talked about dogs prior, and he talks about it because he was originally a DC cop, and there was call boxes like every so often or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm blown away at, I don't know, how far policing has came with technology alone.
Exactly.
What year did your dad go to the, I guess the feds? I know it's changed many times.
I probably in the late 50s, early 60s. That was under the Treasury Department. They were called T-men. And if you look behind me, you see behind me there?
Yeah.
I've got my badges that I had over my career, and underneath are my dad's badges. So I have his original badge when he was a cop, and then the badge from the Treasury Department, the badge from the BNDD, badge from DEA, and then his other badges when he got promoted. He actually retired as an assistant regional director.
Oh, that's amazing. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a very cool. You have any siblings or anything like that?
I have an older sister that's 2 years older than me, and then I have a younger brother, and they live in California.
None of them got into law enforcement or anything like that?
No, I was the only one that. And what was cool about when I first became a cop, my dad, who was retired, and he retired in '79, that his last transfer was in California. So that's where he retired, when he got transferred to California. He actually came and rode with me a couple times on the shift. He wanted to see, if I could handle myself. So, and he was fine when he left.
Your dad tall guy too?
He was 6 feet. He's about 6 feet tall.
When he came and rode with you, do you guys ever have the conversation about, or did you guys ever have the conversation about just about policing and how it's changed from his era to your era?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But he, being the DEA, he never really experienced much police work that I would say is now. He never, he was always in charge of task forces and things like that. So, it was always just always undercover stuff, and always plain clothes, undercover cars, undercover boats. He ran a task force in Miami that was in charge. That they had the Coast Guard, they had Miami-Dade police, City of Miami, Fort Lauderdale cops. They were all in this big task force. It was called the O'Dale Task Force. It was one of the first ones where they had state, local, and federal agents all working together.
That's cool that he was the pioneer for some of that stuff.
Yeah.
You had no desire to go federal?
You know, I was thinking about it. After I became a cop, after a couple of years, I was thinking about it, but then I wound up getting married and having a family, instant family, because I married a woman that already had 2 children. And the thought, you know, I spoke to them, they would have hired me in a heartbeat because of the legacy of my father, plus being law enforcement and being a college degree. I had all the things they were looking for. They would have hired me in a second. And I actually met with them. But then I thought about it. I said that the transfers, if I was single, I would have done it. I probably would have done it. I would have gone into the DEA. But, you know, going through all those transfers, it's hard on a family. It really is. And you get transferred a lot when you're working for the feds.
And I guess you have firsthand experience of that on how the impact of it on your
Yeah.
family. When you were growing up, did you have, difficulties going from different schools? Like, was that a challenge for you?
Well, you know, I was always involved in sports. So I played basketball, football, baseball. So every time I'd go to a school, I'd be on a team and I automatically made friends right away. So the longest I ever stayed in one place was Englewood, New Jersey. And that was 7 years. That was the longest place we ever lived beside, you know. We were transferred to Washington, D.C. one time. 8 months later, we got transferred back to New York. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable sometimes.
Do you think sports had an impact in your ability to be the police, like with the camaraderie, the understanding of team networking, and how you can, I guess, rely on other people to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've always been involved in sports, always, and all my friends were always, you know, that's how you make friends. So, you know, your teammates. I'm always, you know, practicing with your teammates, socializing with your teammates, and you know, once you became a teenager, then you know you go out and you know, try to sneak into some clubs with your other teammates. So we did everything together.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I always talk about it on my podcast, and some people get annoyed by it, but I think there's a huge team component of it. So if you have some experience, even if it's in just like high school or youth sports, and then going into the military, going into law enforcement, or I guess maybe even a fire department, I feel like you would have the ability to work well with each other and know that people are depending on you and you're depending on other people to have success. And
well, I could tell you that, you know, you know, when I worked at the sheriff's office for 29 years, I've made friends that are lifelong friends. In fact, one of the reasons I moved to Tennessee is because one of my best friends, one of the first friends I ever made at BSO when I worked there, was a guy named Wally Haywood. And he moved up here when he retired. Oh, you got to come see Tennessee, blah, blah, blah. So I came and visited him, and I was like looking for a place to retire. And he's probably one of the reasons why I'm here now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I have, you know, lifelong friends that you've made.
Yeah, no, there's a group of 10 of us that kind of all went to school together, played sports together, and we're all still very close friends. And we have a fantasy football draft. So every Labor Day in September, you know, they all come to my house and we do the draft and stuff, and it keeps us close. And I love the ability to have. And when I tell people, like, 10 of my best friends I've known since I was in like elementary and middle school, it's kind of shocking because usually there's some minor things that happen with kids, you know, as they grow up that kind of you go your separate ways, and to hold on to 9 amazing friends for that long is pretty cool.
I would say because I moved around a lot, but I have 3 friends from high school. My last 2 years of high school were in Silver Spring, Maryland. My father worked in Washington, D.C., and we lived in Maryland. So I graduated from John F. Kennedy High School in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I have 3 friends. So I was there in 11th and 12th grade. So those 3 friends I'm still friends with.
That's amazing.
You know, we're all good friends, and we stay in touch with each other. And one lives in San Francisco, one lives in LA, and the other one lives in Florida. And we get together once in a while, and so I'm still friends with those guys. But the cop friends I've made, 5 other cops that I worked with all live within 15 minutes of me now.
That's
They all
crazy.
moved up to Tennessee.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I mean, beyond everything else with Tennessee, I think that they offer like a pension, like the tax on pension or something is like minimal or very low.
No state income tax, and I'm not
Oh, is that what
taxed
it
on
is?
my pension.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
That's
like
awesome.
Florida. There's like 6 states that have no state income tax, and Tennessee is one of them, and they don't tax your pension at all. So that's when you're retired and living on a pension, that means something.
Right. No, yeah, that's awesome. You said that you an instant family. Did any of them go into law enforcement, or would?
No one else has gone into law enforcement that I've been involved with.
That's crazy. Just because of the impact you've had on so many, I don't know. I guess I would anticipate that someone in the family that would. I don't know. Just because you've impacted so many people across the country, I kind of find it shocking that no one in the family went.
But like you say, impact somebody. I never thought of that. I never even thought for 1 second that I had any impact on anybody's career ever. And getting into that, I wanted to mention the guy named Jack, who has cancer, and he's a cop in Wisconsin, and he sent, I guess through Copville and Mike, he sent a picture to Mike, and he has that shirt that has my rookie picture on it, and he's got the baseball card taped to his water bottle, and he says through Mike, and then I wound up talking to him myself, that every time he goes for chemotherapy, he puts on the shirt with my picture on it, and I give him inspiration to fight cancer. And he's like, he became a cop because he watched the early episodes of Cop, and I was an influence upon him. And it's like, it was so emotional when I actually called him that I actually started to cry on the phone. I just could not believe that I meant so much to this guy, and that I'm helping him fight his cancer. And it was just,
It's amazing.
I was blown away by it.
How is he doing?
He's doing great. I mean, he just sent me another picture of himself, and he's fighting it. I'm gonna stay in touch with him, and I'm gonna try to help any way I can. And his father actually messaged me yesterday. His father had messaged me and said, thanked me for being such an influence on him. And all he does is talk about me every day. And his grandmother knows about me, and his sister and his mother. And it's like he made them watch the Copville podcast. He made them all watch it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I started to actually follow him on Instagram. He's a young guy.
He's only 23 years old.
Man, crazy. What do you know? What form of cancer? Are you allowed to say?
No, I didn't ask him, but he's got to get chemo treatments like every week. Yeah. So he's going through some tough times.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep him in our prayers. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, when you're on the job, what kind of stuff did you do outside of work to keep you kind of sane and I don't know, dealing with the stress of it?
Always been involved with the sports, and I played on the Broward Sheriff's Office had what they call a police Olympic team. So we had the police Olympics every year. So I played on that team. So I was always playing sports. I always played in leagues. In my off time, I was always in some kind of. I kind of gravitated towards basketball mostly when I was a cop. I always played in I guess rec leagues they call them. So I was always playing basketball, and then I also got into refereeing with my friend Wally, who lives up here now. So we became refs, and then my son, I was coaching. I was always coaching football, and I coached baseball a lot. So I was always involved with sports, doing stuff like that. That's what I did when I was in my off time.
Yeah, that's my escape from reality. I'm still I've always been involved in sports, but like even now, like just following sports and stuff, it kind of gives me some moment of clarity where I can just sit down and kind of, I don't know, watch sports, not think about the job, and it is honestly like a stress reliever for me. So that's I don't know. I guess I can relate there. What was your I don't know, your favorite position in the police department, and when you went in, were you striving to get to that spot, or was that just something that once you were a cop, it came up and you were attracted to it?
I think I always gravitated towards narcotic enforcement. Always. I mean, I don't know, it just came natural to me. So, when I was on the road patrol, I was making. There were times I'd make 40 arrests a month.
Damn.
I was arresting people. Like I'd arrest a guy, go right back, arrest another guy. I mean, I was doing 2, 3 arrests a day sometimes, and it was like fishing in a barrel. Because crack was all street level shit that I was arresting guys on. And then I started developing some CIs, some confidential informants. I'd catch a guy with a crack rock, not a crack pipe, and I would, kind of hold it over his head and try to get some information from him and say, hey, I can bust you for this, but if you give me who's doing all the burglaries in this area, I'll let you slide on this one. I had that discretion, because it's a misdemeanor.
Right.
So I actually started like solving some crimes, and then at the district level, we had our own detective division in that particular district, and we did burglaries and thefts and some robberies and stuff. And I guess the sergeant in charge of that unit, he read my reports every day and knew I was feeding him some good information to bust some guys that were doing burglaries and stuff. So when an opening came in that unit, he asked me to be a district detective. So I just went to that, and I became a detective for a few years, and then I took the sergeant's test, and then I made sergeant. Then I got transferred to another district. I was transferred to Deerfield Beach. So I went there and became a road patrol sergeant, and then they had an opening in the unit there, what they call a street crimes unit, a selective enforcement team. So I got to do that, and then I had 4 detectives, and I got to. We talked about I had my own drug dog in that unit, and we basically did about 4 or 5 search warrants every month. We did jump outs, reverse stings, prostitution stings, and some surveillance work, and that was. When you say the assignments, that was my favorite assignment because every day was different. You could adjust your hours. I didn't have to work a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. Or I could, whatever was needed, I could adjust my hours to. And having my own drug dog was like I just loved it. I took him to work every day with me, and every time we did search warrants and stuff, I'd bring him along. And I really got the drug dog because we did some search warrants and hit the homes, and we did buys out of these houses. We knew there was drugs there. We couldn't find them. And we did this one house, couldn't find the drugs, did it again. We made buys, the same house over and over. So then when I had the drug dog, the first search warrant we did after I got the drug dog, I just got certified. We hit this house. It's a 2-bedroom apartment, and searched the house. Can't find a damn thing. So all the detectives there are looking at me. They go, Jerry, we can't find anything here. So I said, let me bring in the drug dog. So he was in the car. I bring him in, take him all around the 2 bedrooms. And all of a sudden, he was a passive alert. So he sat in the corner of where the kitchen cabinets are. He sat right down. So I tell the detective, I said, come over here. Look at this area here. He's alerting in this. You don't pinpoint it exactly, as you know.
Right.
It's the area, depending on where the let's say the air conditioning is on, the wind, how the wind is swirling in the room. It could be coming from a different area, even though it might be pinpointing over here, but the odor's coming from a different area.
Right.
So I said, hey, look over here. So he searched it and said, Jerry, there's nothing here. So they're all looking at me like, I'm sweating bullets. This is the first real search warrant I'm doing. So I take the dog around again. I said, let me do it again. So I go over there, boom, hits right there, same spot. So his name was Jeff. I said, Jeff, come over here, man. I said, I really need you to detail this area. So he gets on his hands and knees, and he's like tapping the floorboard and stuff like that. All of a sudden he taps it, and he hears like a hollow noise. And sure enough, we take a little pry bar and open it up. All the dope was there. The money was there. His passport was there. Everything was there. So now they're high-fiving me, and and it was like, I was like jumping for joy.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a small world that I had a dog from the same trainer that you got your dog from.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bobby Anderson. I was working in the Broward Sheriff's Office, but Bobby was a trainer for the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office.
Mhm.
But any agency could go to his school, so I signed up and I went to his drug dog school.
And Bobby's still in the canine world. He's still out there.
Yep.
It's great. When was this? What year was this? I'm just curious.
This is 90. I want to say like 94.
Man, he's been doing it forever.
Yeah, exactly. Bobby was a sergeant. He was when I took his drug class, he was the sergeant in charge of PBSO's canine unit.
Okay. Crazy small world. And you talked about dogs. I think for me, watching a dog progress from where he was and then like watching him work independently, I think that is some of the most rewarding stuff I've done in police work. It just, you see all the hard work and foundation building actually pay off. It just takes time, but it's super rewarding when it does start to pay off.
What's really neat about a dog is that, they don't, people go, oh, all these false alerts or whatever like that. It's like, I'll give you an example. I could stop a car, guys a known drug dealer, stop his car. And the guy that would maybe have kilos in his car. So he had kilos in his trunk. Well, let's say by the time we stopped the car, there was no kilos, gone. The dog alerts on the car, okay? And people don't realize the residual odor that builds up when you close a trunk. So if the guy just had a kilo in that car, the dog's going to alert on it, even though the kilo is not there, because there's residual odor there. So
especially like in somewhere like down south and in the heat, like it's going to stay there for, it'll probably burn off, but it's still going to be there for a day or two at least.
Exactly. So I had a couple of those where, oh, you're full of crap. There's nothing here. Well, you have to understand how dogs work on odor. They don't. They just work. It's odor it's not drugs. Everyone says it's a drug detection dog. It's really an odor detection dog.
Right. Exactly.
That's what you have to understand. The dog. You can train a dog to alert on anything. They can alert. I know dogs that alert on cell phones. They take them into prisons and they take dogs, and if there's a cell phone there, they'll alert on that if you could train them to do that. So it's whatever odor that money dogs. They have dogs at the airport that would alert on money, big sums of money.
Yeah, there's the way that the dogs have evolved anyways, or like the competition aspect of it. I didn't know this until this past March, but there's dog competitions over like essential oils, and that's all they do is like they train their dogs to smell specifically essential oils, and then they go have like these competitions and who can find it the fastest within how close and with no false alerts or anything along those lines. It's just whatever you imprint your dog on, he can alert to and be proficient at it.
Yeah, and then I took this other advanced class, kind of for planes and buses and trains. It was another 80-hour class that I put my dog through, and it was really a neat kind of thing to do because, one of the tests that we did is you take the dog on a 767, which is a big plane that seats like 250 people. So, you take your dog up the stairs, and and there's two hides. So the guy, it's just you and the dog and the guy and the trainer, and the guy says, "There's two hides in here." Well, taking a dog and going, aisle by aisle by aisle by aisle would take you forever, So since it was a contained area, I just cut my dog loose, and it was a good size, it was a good kilo of cocaine, so it's giving off some odor. I just literally cut my dog loose and just watch him work, and I just would stay behind him, and he worked, and I found both of those hides within about 10 minutes on a plane that size because I never had the dog on a leash. I let him work, and he just would go back and forth and finally just zero in on an area, and then he'd sit and I'd say, "It's over there." I'd call it, and he said, "Yeah, there it is." So it was neat doing stuff like that.
Yeah, very cool. Being a parent and being in law enforcement, is that challenging?
Yeah, because you're not, you're not able to make my sons play sports, so I missed some of their games. The good thing is, as I got older, my son Jake, who became a great baseball player. He, as I got older, you got more seniority. And then since I never was able to get promoted above sergeant, and, we can talk about that forever, DEI as far as I'm concerned. I was certainly qualified to be a supervisor above sergeant. So I would wind up being a sergeant for 24 years out of my career. And I built up a lot of seniority. So, everything's based on seniority. So as I got older and I was a senior sergeant, I could get the days off I wanted and the shift I wanted and things like that. So as I got older, I got to, be at most of my son's games. And that was important. That was important to me.
So the sacrifices as a young cop kind of paid off in the end for you, so you could make more time for family?
Absolutely. Yeah. You could, like I said, if you have seniority, you get the vacation time first, the days off first, and the shift first. And that's what, so you could try to gear your police work around your family life if you could.
Was there a challenge with the wives? I know that you had been separated or whatever, but it was a lot of that the impact of work, or was that personal reasons that outside of the job?
It was a combination of different things. My first wife was a police officer, and she was very much wanting to be a supervisor also, and she wound up being a school resource officer, and I thought she could stay as a school resource officer because that's more of a 8 to 4 job, which is good for your family. But she wound up getting promoted and then going to midnights, and now I'm working afternoons, and we never could really have a good life together because we're always working different shifts, different days off, and it put a big stress on the family.
Yeah, on top of everything with the job and that's rough.
Plus, I was also I got on this at Broward Sheriff's Office. We had a riot control unit called Field Force, and I was kind of volunteered for that. They always kind of take the new guys, and I wound up kind of enjoying it and wound up becoming one of the longest Field Force guys ever. I was on Field Force for 27 years, and I wound up becoming supervisor in Field Force in charge of a grenadier unit and a cut team unit. And so I would get sent away sometimes for a week at a time because all the hurricanes that hit Florida, if they would destroy another agency like Northern Florida or anywhere, they would send our Field Force units to help. We had mutual aid throughout the state, so we would actually go around and help. And I also Miami, during the World Trade Organization in Miami, we were detached down to Miami we had like 100 cops down there, and we actually had a riot, kind of like what was going on in LA recently, where these protesters with the Antifa and all these guys, we actually had a full blown out riot in Miami one of the days I was down there.
So is Field Force like the I guess the riot police?
Yeah, but it's separate. I mean, it's an additional assignment. You don't it's not full time. They only call Field Force when it's needed.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
When it comes to the internal stuff with your agency and being on cops, oftentimes there's people within agencies that they might not even want the position, but there's sometimes like animosity or jealousy that comes with just being, I don't know, at a specialty or anything like that. When you were on cops, was there any type of animosity based on you just being on the show alone?
I'd say there was some jealousy, but you have to realize too, a lot of the times they were filming me. If I'm on a call, all the other guys are also on that call. And so they were getting filmed also. And some of them really liked it because once they saw the show, hey, they could tell their parents, hey, look at me, I'm on TV. I got my 15 minutes of fame. So yeah, there was some jealousy. Why Jerry? Why are we picking Jerry to be on? Well, it was an obvious reason. The connection I had with the guys that were the producers. I
wonder if they'd even be there if they didn't know you.
They wouldn't have.
Right.
They probably would. I'm part of the reason they came back to Broward because I'm the one that introduced them to Navarro to begin with.
Right.
So if it wasn't for me, they would have never come to Broward anyway.
So even back in the day, there was still that, I guess, I don't know, animosity or jealousy that took place within agencies.
A little, but it didn't affect me that much. I just went about my business, and when those guys were riding with me, it's like after a while I didn't even notice them. They were, they would literally ride with me the entire shift, and we'd eat together. If I had a meal break, they'd eat with me, and they got to know me really well.
How was that transition? I guess you were a young cop, but I'm
I
assuming
wasn't that young. I didn't start police work till I was 30.
young in your profession. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I didn't mean, yeah. But back then, I'm assuming that there wasn't a lot of body cams, or if any, or even car cameras. So
Well,
was there...
the only guys that had car cameras were the DUI units. That was it.
Interesting.
So the first thing I got when I was a detective was not even a digital pager. It was a voice pager. And it was kind of embarrassing because you could be like in a class. Let's say you're taking some kind of, I was like interviews and interrogation class or something like that. You'd be in the class and with 30 other guys, and all of a sudden you would hear beep, 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 beep. And then all of a sudden you'd hear somebody go, "Hey, honey, could you bring home a gallon of milk before you get home?" And the whole class is looking at you because you couldn't shut that thing off. So you could only listen to the message that was coming through the pager. So that's the first pager I had.
I never even knew there was something like that existed. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
it was a voice pager. And all you could do was get a message like, "Hey, call me when you get out of class," or whatever. But you had to leave it on so everybody could hear it.
Wow, that's crazy. I've never even heard of that in my life. I never didn't even know something like that existed.
Well, I'm an old school guy.
No, I love it. Talking about old school stuff. When I got hired in 2007, so we had cell phones and pagers and in-car cameras. We didn't have a lot of the technology that's out there now, just because it's advancing so fast. But you talked about going out there and cultivating information in CIs and stuff, and that's how you got into the bureau. I did similar things. Like I would, if I stopped someone that had a user amount of marijuana or, misdemeanor type stuff that I could then use. And all I'd ever ask for is, as a patrolman, is like, well, where are you getting it from? And then in my downtime, I would just go by that house, or I would sit down the street, and I literally had a sticky notepad that I would just put on my computer and with just addresses on it. But I feel like that type of policing I don't know, is going or it's gone. And I think the inability to communicate is hampering, I think, everyone in society, but definitely in law enforcement. I think that if you can communicate to people, it prolongs and makes this career a lot easier, because in the grand scheme of things, you can talk yourself in a lot of situations or out of a lot of situations, good or bad. And as society goes on and we're so involved in electronics and not even like phone calls, it's like text messages and IMs. I feel like that face-to-face communication is going away, and it's sad to watch.
It's changed, to the fact that it's like even like you look at all the new videos, and they do like reviews of like traffic stops and how did it go, and now you've got somebody with a cell phone, you've got a body camera on. They're like, this whole thing, as far as they all think they know, they're all like jailhouse lawyers to me, especially these like sovereign citizens. They all think they know what the law is, and you're going back and forth and back and forth, and because everything's on video now, like there's sometimes a hesitation, about stuff. And I stopped some sovereign citizens, a couple times. I dealt with them very swiftly. I would not go back and forth with these guys. I mean, I don't know if I would be in trouble for some of the things I did, but I didn't have the patience for these son of a bitches. And if I had to break the window, I'd give them maybe 2 chances. I've seen videos where these guys are talking for hours. "Give me your supervisor." Guy asks for a supervisor, I tell him to go fuck himself. Break his window, pull him out of the car. That's, he has no license. He's got no registration. He's got a bad tag on there. I'm arresting you. You're going to jail. So I don't care. You could ask for all the supervisors in the world. If I called my supervisor and I told him this is what I got, he says, "Arrest the son of a bitch. I'm not coming out there."
Yeah, handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think that it would make society so much better if everyone knew what cops could and couldn't do. On both ends, like cops shouldn't be able to know exactly what I can do in these situations and what I can't do. And I'm not opposed. I would wish everyone did, because then when you have these incidents, you'd be like, no, you can't do that. Like you can't. Like I don't know. And you're talking about being in trouble. I think that I don't know about saying to go f yourself, but you know, like in certain states, I think that's perfectly acceptable. Like I ask you for something, if you refuse to provide it, like if you, the longer you wait and the fear of going hands on turns these situations into, it can more of a violent situation. Where if you handle it swiftly, like there's you're putting them through this OODA loop position where they're not ready to act, they're not preparing. But if you build up this animosity for 30 minutes or more, like he's getting pissed and he's planning all this stuff in his head, where if you handle it fast, it resolves itself.
Absolutely. I had a guy when cell phones started. This guy, I pull him over, and I'm going to write him a ticket. And I was a sergeant. I mean, we were working on an operation. There's a lot of railroad tracks in Florida, and they had a whole big like ticket or click, one of the seatbelt things, ticket, click it or ticket. They had this thing where guys were sitting on at the intersections where there's a railroad crossing. People would be sitting right on the railroad crossing. You got to wait, for the light to change before you can move up. So they had this whole big thing about, cars sitting on the railroad tracks during so I was out there helping, do this operation. So I had this guy pull him over, and I'm talking to him, and I said, hey, give me your license and registration. He says, he says, I'm going to start dialing his attorney. He says, here, my attorney wants to talk to you. I took his cell phone and I just threw it right into the back seat. I said, I don't give a shit about your attorney. We're not handling this case in court right now. You're giving me your license and registration, or I'm going to pull you out through the sunroof and give you a beating. I mean, that's how, that's what I did, and as soon as you act like that, it's like, they talk about de-escalation, all this de-escalation. To me, if I escalated something to the point where this guy became a little afraid of me, like he looked at me like this cop might be a little nutty, and you have that command presence. I'm not taking any of your shit. Give me what I want, or you're going to get your ass whooped, and it worked.
Yeah. The whole ass whooping aspect. But if you're confident in knowing what you can do based on the case law as a cop, you're not second guessing it, and you're comfortable. You're comfortable in these situations now because you're like, no, I know exactly what I can do. I've been doing this for a little bit. Like, this is what's going to take place. And in matter of fact, like the courtroom is for you to decide with your attorney. But right now, like that's what it is. And the courts could rule in your favor or they could not. But I know legally, I know what I'm doing, and I'm allowed to do this. And calling supervisors to the scene, I think that is, I'm still mind blown that departments force their supervisors to go to scenes in those situations. Like, no, I need your supervisor. It's like, no, you're a cop. You have a badge. You have a gun. You've been through the academy. You've been through the training.
Yeah.
You handle it. And if you have a complaint, I'll meet you on station. Like it's crazy to me that you're wasting manpower and you're putting cops in a vulnerable situation waiting for a supervisor to return. A car's a completely unchecked box. And if this guy's like, oh, he's going to go call a supervisor and have him come here and giving me more opportunities to plan, I don't know, something against you or attack you or, let you get your guard down and whatever the situation, go into pursuits are so dangerous. I don't know. I just feel like as cops, we should be able to handle that stuff immediately with the best way and legally and within your rules and regs as possible. And the longer you prolong it, the worse it makes it, I feel like.
Yeah. Like if I got called to a scene by a deputy because he wanted me there, and I tell the deputy, I said, if you're calling me to a scene and I make a decision, you might not like the decision I'm going to make. Because once you call me to the scene, I'm going to maybe handle it the way I think it should be handled, and you might not like it. So if you're calling me to the scene, you better be prepared for my opinion.
Yeah, I thought you were going down the avenue of like a deputy not knowing what to do or something like that. So he's calling you for advice or something. I'm like, that's a different scenario than this person wants a supervisor because he doesn't like the way that I'm handling it.
Listen, when I was a road patrol sergeant, I would go I spent very little time in the office. I was on the road with my deputies. So my deputies are going to calls, and a lot of times I'm their backup because, in the unincorporated areas, you're running short. So I'm running backup for these guys. So I got to do evaluations on these guys. So I got to go to calls. I got to see how they're handling things. So a lot of times I'm on the road all the time, going to their calls.
You touched on training too. How often did your department send you to training to make you the cop that you were and to better your profession and career, or how many times did you send yourself? Is there a good ratio, or were you
Well,
sending yourself more often?
they always had classes you could take, all these different classes you could take that you could sign up for. I'd say half the classes I signed up for, I did on my own time because the agency wasn't going to do it. And then some of them they would send you to, because let's say once I got put into the detective division, there were certain classes they wanted you to take. So if a interviews and interrogation class came up, they would send you to that class because you needed that to be a detective. But there were other classes that I would sign up for, street survival classes I would take on my own. Sometimes advanced firearms training I would take. And then then you had your what they call in-service training. Every year you had to have you had to have that 40-hour block of in-service training. And it was, go over case law, and you had to, sometimes you had to have, the DEI started happening, all the, diversity training and all this stuff that started coming into effect.
So yeah, I think it's updated, but yeah, we started at 24 hours. That was mandatory because case law is always updating. So there's always case law, but then it was like your psychomotor skills, like defensive tactics, firearms, Evo, and then you would get maybe I think that would encompass like 8 or 10 hours or something. And then you could have whatever elective, but you had to have 24 hours of some type of training a year annually. And I think now it's upped a little bit, but that's how it was for a long time here, anyways.
We had 40. You had to do 40 hours every year. And that included your firearms training too. So every year you had to qualify, and then the other classes were whatever was in the news at that time. You'd have to, they'd come up with classes because something was in the news.
We kind of talked about social media and the influence on society, but I do want to touch on this just because the past couple years, and I don't know if it's like the TikTok phase where even though these younger cops aren't communicating, they're seeing communication happen compared to the old apps like the Instagram, Facebooks. It's like stills, like, pictures. But the past, I don't know, maybe 2 years, we've hired some amazing cops that are young that have the ability to communicate with anyone. And it's refreshing to see. So I'm hoping that old, maybe 10-year era where, communication kind of went away and it wasn't as good and it wasn't as person to person and they didn't show a lot of empathy or anything along those lines. I feel like we're getting in. I'm hoping that this is a trend and we're getting into an era where communication comes back at least.
It's, to me, when I started police work, people were on waiting lists to get in. Now,
same here.
Now they're having a hard time hiring guys because certain departments they have a mess, like in New York, some of this stuff that went on in New York, they had like, as soon as they could, they were, like 30, 40, 50 people retiring in one day. And you can't replace people that soon because, you have to go through a police academy. And then even after the academy, then you've got, 3 months of training. It's almost a year by the time you go through a police academy till the guy is actually cut loose on his own. Okay.
And even then, you're not comfortable. Like it took me, and maybe I'm just a slow learner, but I would bet 5 years is when I was like comfortable in pretty much any situation, knowing like what I legally can and can't do. But like you're still learning. Like you're getting put in these situations, different situations on a daily basis. Like, oh shit, like this is a call I've never experienced before. Like I think at minimum, and a bigger department like New York PD, you're probably learning within 2 to 3 years, but smaller departments, that learning curve is huge.
Like I'll give you an example. Because after the academy, I got sent to that district. So I got to see, while I was on FTO, I got to see rapes, robberies, murders, stabbings, shootings, all every week I was seeing this stuff. Okay. Wow. So I'm learning quick. I mean, I'm learning how to write the reports. I'm learning how to, you're the first there. You got to tape off the crime scene. All these different things. I'm learning fast because I'm experienced in all. My police academy was for the county, and there are 20 different cities in the county. They all go to the same police academy. We just had a different patch on our uniform. That's all. So I'm talking to some of the guys I made friends with in the academy. After the academy, you make friends, and so I'm talking to a guy that's in another city that is working in more of a very affluent neighborhood, residential neighborhood, and here I'm working in an urban area. So I'm maybe I'd meet him after work and we'd have a beer or something like that, and I'm telling him all the stuff that I'm seeing, and he's like, "Man, I went 3 days. I didn't even have a call."
Exactly. Yeah, that's my point.
And I'm saying I just had 16 calls in one day. So I don't even get a lunch break because I'm going from call to call. And so I'm telling him all these different calls I'm going to. And he's like, "Man, you actually saw a guy shot in the head the other day?" I go, "Yeah." So, I mean, it's you get into that area and you learn fast.
Also with that, I think you're losing a ton of knowledge again, like we talked about earlier, but you're not only on the job, but like the inner working dynamics of the politics of police departments and stuff. And we don't see a lot of cops, like when I first started that were staying 30 plus years, we're seeing cops in Indiana. You can get your pension after 20. You can't collect until you're 52, but a lot of guys are just, if they get hired young enough, they'll go do another job for another 10 or 20 years and get 2 pensions. So we're not seeing these guys stay that long. So I just feel like we're losing the top end knowledge. We're losing this middle knowledge because guys are doing 20 and out. And it's just, I don't know. I'm afraid that we're going to be in a cycle of young cops that aren't getting passed down the knowledge that is necessary to handle the streets and the politic aspect of it within departments and even within the city, like with community leaders and things along those lines. And it's kind of a scary spot that we're in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I started, I had like a 10-year career before I started police work. So it's like, I was in the academy. I was one of the older guys. Most of the guys in the academy they're in their young 20s. In fact, there was a couple guys that were like 19. They couldn't even buy their own gun. They had to have their parents buy their gun for them because the department didn't issue us a gun. We had to have our own gun.
Wow.
We had to buy our own gun. They told you the parameters of what you could carry, and we had to have our own gun. When a department issues you a gun, they can tell you what gun you're going to carry.
Right.
So after I left the sheriff's office, I worked at Coral Springs Police Department for a couple of years as a school resource officer. They provided me with everything. They gave me a rifle. They gave me a gun. I had to carry what they gave me, but that's fine because then I didn't have to spend the money to.
Yes, good or bad, you get what they give you, but then it's also not you're out of pocket.
Yeah. So anyway, being an older guy, so I had some life experience when I started. So if I went to a domestic, I'm 30, so I'm not 19.
Right.
So how does a 19-year-old go into a house with, people that are in their 30s and 40s and tell them, how to run a marriage when they don't even have a damn girlfriend?
No, I agree. I mean, and yeah, that's. I got her when I was 25, and I didn't have a wife, and yeah, I was going to those calls with like my parents' age, and I'm like, man, it took me a while to feel comfortable to even have the conversation with the people that are calling me there. I was more standing around like being a mediator, like, oh, I don't know, like this is what he says, this is what she says, like, can we come to a peaceful resolution? Because I have no world or advice for you guys. Like, I just don't have that experience in my life yet.
Yeah, so that helped a little, that I had some life experience before I started police work. So I think it made me a better cop.
How long have you been retired for?
I retired in June. It's actually 8 years. June of 2017, I retired.
Do you miss it?
I miss the camaraderie. I don't miss putting on a uniform anymore. It's like the thought of, I'm 70 years old. What am I going to do? Now I couldn't be in a fight right now. I'd get my ass whooped.
I get it. No, I mean, like that was going to be my follow-up question. If you do miss it, what do you miss? And
yeah,
I did this mini series on this podcast, and it was a bunch of retired interdiction guys. I don't know, I think there's 8 or 10 of them out there, and every single one of them has said that they miss the camaraderie, they miss the phone calls, working in those like specialty units. You even build a closer bond with those individuals, and that's what they miss most about it.
Yeah, it's funny because being 30, I did 31 years total. So 31 years, it's a long time to do a job, and it's just you do miss it, but it's like what happened at the end of my I'd say the last 5 years, when the defunding police started and all that stuff, it became difficult to be a cop. It's like I experienced a lot of negativity where cops used, when I first started, I got some respect and it was people respected the badge, and there was a lot more of that going on. Not so much. It's like it was like a war against cops for a while. It really was. And it really became, just disrespect. You go into a restaurant and you'd have some waiter talk to you like crap, and God knows, maybe he was spitting in your food or something. It's just, you could tell certain people just had a real negative attitude towards us.
That's what I don't know. Maybe you know this. Maybe this is even a question that I don't know anyone that would have the answer to. I just don't know when the switch was that law enforcement became the focus of the negativity in this country. Like I just don't know when that switch was. It's crazy to me.
I remember it was when Obama was the president.
Really?
Yeah, that's when I noticed it the most. His second term, things started really changing towards police then. That's when I noticed it.
Because were you around for like the Rodney King?
Oh yeah, I was working then, and Rodney King, even though it happened, I'm in South Florida and Rodney King's in California, and it affected the whole nation. How things, and that's when, that was done with a beta cam. If you remember, the videotaping, people, the original beta cams that people used professionally to do shows. Then they started making little mini beta cams that people could buy at home and film their, their birthday parties and things like that. That started the whole thing about filming cops, because no one knew about that video until a neighbor was watching what was going on. So that kind of started all this stuff around then, and then you've had the George Floyd and and all the
Ferguson was the next one. I remember Rodney King as a kid. I was probably I don't know, I think it was like 91 or whatever. So I was like 9 years old, but I do remember that. And then as a cop, I remember Ferguson was the Mike Brown truth that came out to be a complete lie.
And Trayvon Martin wasn't even the guy that got into Trayvon Martin wasn't even the guy. He was a civilian that got involved with Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, there's been so many that, like, in those situations where somehow law enforcement becomes like the focal point, and law enforcement wasn't even involved. There's another one, I think in Georgia, that was like 2 citizens that I think even ended up killing a guy, and somehow that was an anti-police thing. And I'm like, they have nothing to do with law enforcement. So that's what I mean. Like, I don't understand how these situations turn into a police problem when they're not even cops. And some of these situations have been people just blatantly lie about cops. I don't know. It sucks, because I feel like as a cop, in order to get good cops into this profession, you need to glorify this profession. It is one of the most selfless positions you can have, or professions you can have. And we need to attract the right people to do it. And by making it and demonizing all of us for actions when they're bad, there's bad apples in every profession. So to demonize all cops in those situations is disheartening, and all it's going to do is be detrimental to not only the profession but also society. Because if you're not getting any good cops to apply, like who are you going to count on to protect you and to uphold the integrity of the laws? I don't know.
Well, you got like you said, bad apples in every profession, but the difference between us is that we have to make split second decisions and it could be life or death. So if I'm a regular guy that works for an insurance company and I get in my car and I drive to work, I'm at my work at 9 o'clock, I'm in my office all day, I do my work, I might go out to lunch, 5 o'clock comes around, I drive home, okay? Cop, I'm driving, road patrol, you're in a car all day. So you're in the car 8, 10, 12 hours, depending on what kind of shift you are. So driving around that much, you're automatically exposed to an accident because you're driving all day. So that's number one. Number two, you could go from a call from 0 to 10 in 1 second, just like that. So you could go to a domestic, you walk in the door and you turn around and there's a guy with a gun pointing right at you. I mean, you went from 0 to 100, just like that. You might have to shoot that guy. You might get shot. So, I got to wear a vest to go to work. Guy that works in an insurance company, does he wear a vest? Does he put on a gun belt? I mean, all this, just getting dressed in the morning or night or whatever shift you're working, putting on a vest, putting on a gun belt, putting on your taser, your ASP, your nunchucks, whatever you're carrying, your gun, making sure make sure you got your rounds on, your magazines and your radio and all this stuff you're putting on. That starts the stress of just getting dressed because you're going to work. Now you're kissing your wife goodbye or your husband goodbye. And, your wife is, am I going to see him when he comes home? All that takes place. Civilians don't go through any of that. And you're going through that every day.
Yep.
So, and your adrenaline goes from 0 to 100, then back down again.
Oh,
and
it plays havoc on your body.
Yeah. I mean, a call, not even a call. I guess I call it cop's instinct, or that the neck on the hair on the neck stands up.
Sense or whatever.
That the little voice on the back of your head. Like one day I was stopping this dope car, and I got the, it's nighttime and I've got the spotlight on him and the overheads on him. And I'm walking up to the car and there's 4 guys in the car and the windows are kind of dark. And I'm like, and these guys are like, I could see them like reaching under the seat and I just, that little voice on my head said, man, you go up to this car, you're going to get shot. So I walked back to my car and I got on the loudspeaker and I said, oh, never mind, wrong car. But meanwhile, I had the tag and the description. Then I got on the radio and I called 4 deputies to do a traffic stop on this car. And we wound up, the guy's got a Tech 9 under the seat. This guy's there's like 3 guns in the car. So, if I didn't have that instinct I could have been shot easily going up to that car. But then once I did a felony stop with the other deputies, we have the advantage.
Yep.
You can't put yourself in those positions.
No, I agree. I mean, we're always in the they always have the upper hand because action is always going to be reaction, but you can mitigate that by exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I love this profession. I don't have kids, but it would be hard to send my kid into this profession, even if they wanted to. If your kid wanted to go into the profession, what would your advice be?
Well, at one time I did talk to my son he just graduated from University of Tennessee with a degree in mechanical engineering, which, I couldn't even take like 1/3 of the classes that he took. He's taking, quantum physics and all these classes. I don't know how he does
quantum physics.
Yeah. I mean, he's taking all these classes. I mean, at one time he was talking about maybe, becoming an FBI agent because he wouldn't want to be a street cop, but he might want it to be like an investigator. And as smart as he is, he could have, maybe done money trails or, more white collar crime stuff because he's good with numbers. So, maybe he would do that. But he wants to become a mechanical engineer. So that's what he's going to do.
Perfect. That's awesome. Yeah. I guess if you were going into the specialty like the FBI or something, you're not working a lot of the unknowns.
Yeah.
Like the beat cops do and stuff. So that makes sense. I mean, I love this profession and I don't want to deter people from doing it. And you just need the right people to do it. And they have to be have an understanding of what they're going into. And on the other end of where, if we don't glorify the profession and glorify the good people, on the other end of it, like if we don't give people a false perception of what some people do on social media and what the job entails, when those people get the job that aren't mentally prepared for what they're going to see, again, that's going to be detrimental to the profession. Like it's on both ends. You have to give a fair and balanced, I guess, equation or insight of what the job is. And can it be bad? Yeah, but it's still the greatest profession in the world. Is it dancing in uniform? Absolutely not. That's not what the profession is. So
Yeah.
you give guys and girls the false perception. They're not mentally prepared for when those bad situations happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and like you said, any profession, I call it the 10 percenter. So, if you have 10%, let's say where I worked, you have 1,500 sworn deputies, and 10% of them, that's a lot of deputies that are, that shouldn't be carrying a gun and a badge. And when those guys are not trained properly or making good decisions, and somehow they took the psych and got through, they shouldn't be a cop. Those are the guys that the news focuses on because it's a bad shoot, okay, and a bad decision that he made, and it affects all of us. And it's the news. The news has a way, especially now with social media, you get one bad situation that goes on, and it's all over the country, and all of a sudden, you run into somebody that doesn't like law enforcement, and then they just keep pointing to that incident. And because the news will play it over and over again. And then all of a sudden you're getting all that negativity. And that's the problem. Cops that shouldn't be cops. And I'm the first to admit it. There's 10 percenters. There's a lot of cops out there shouldn't be cops. If you talk to Izzo, he says, most of the females shouldn't be cops. I don't agree with him. I think if a female can do the job, she can do the job. And I've worked with females that are badass females. So, they can do the job. And I take them as a backup. But in general, in what he said, I agree with him on certain parts. A guy his size or a guy my size, and there's a female that's like 5'2". She's not going to arrest me. She's not going to be able to arrest me unless she's like a triple degree black belt or something. That person is not going to arrest me. They're not going to be able to put me in handcuffs. And that's
there's
the
a lot
problem.
of I'll go on the contrary to that. There's a lot of male cops that don't take pride in what they do, and they don't work out and they don't do any of that stuff that would be in the same situation.
Yeah. I've seen videos of the male and the female together, and they look like Laurel and Hardy, and they look like the Keystone Cops. They look completely out of touch. They're throwing their guns are flying on the ground, and they're getting involved in shootings because they don't have the tools to physically take somebody into custody, and it escalates to the point where somebody's getting shot.
Why is law enforcement training so expensive? I don't know. What we have done, there's been approximately 10 companies with approximately 16 to 18 instructors that have came together that are willing to put on a 3.5-day conference in South Carolina. April 20th is registration. The conference is the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. In 2026, we'll be in Myrtle Beach. It'll be $99 for the entire conference, thanks to some amazing sponsors and even better instructors that are willing to donate and volunteer their time to make the profession better. That being said, Justice X Conference, April 20th to 24th, 2026. I want to see you there. You're going to love it. We have amazing names. I'm going to drop some bombshells on here. If you listen to the podcast, you get a little heads up. We're going to have John Mattingly. We're going to have Tom Rizzo. We're going to have Heather Gloglich. We're going to have Nick German. We're going to have Tom Stack. We're going to have many, many other instructors. But those are some of the amazing people that have came together, willing to give you some of the cheapest education to make the profession better because they're selfless and they volunteer their time. So I can't wait to see you there. And again, that goes back on both ends. That goes again to like taking personal pride in who you are and not relying on other people. So if you are a female cop, I feel like you have to just work that much harder, just because inherently men are built stronger. They're bigger theoretically. I'm not, and I'm talking in generalities here. So
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
it's just harder for them. But I think that there are women out there that put in the work and know this, and that's put in more work than most men to make sure that they go home to their family and kids at night, and they handle themselves respectfully and professionally in those situations, and they're able to do it.
Yeah.
There's a video a few years ago. There was a short little Chicago copper, and a big tall dude trying to get away, and she knew some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She like pulled his shirt over his head, like hip tossed him, and took him into custody all by herself. And I was like, I mean, I'm not joking. She was probably a foot shorter than him, and it was super impressive. Sure, he wasn't actively fighting; he was just trying to get away, but she was able to handle it herself. And I look at that, and I'm like, she takes pride in what she does, and takes pride in the profession.
That's the exception, though. You know, I mean, I didn't work. I don't remember working with girls that could, that are jujitsu girls. I mean, they worked out and they were in good shape, and yeah, they could handle themselves. But I don't remember too many girls that were like black belts.
No, I'm not. And again, yeah, I'm not saying that they are. They're one of my great friends is she's a cop in New Jersey. Her name's Heather Gloglich, and she is in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and she takes a lot of pride in who she is. So I look at her and I'm like, she could be the role model for these girls that are out there doing it. Like, she's mid 40s. I don't want to give her exact age, but yeah, she's still out there. She's had hip replacements, knee replacements, and she's still actively on the mat, rolling with these young kids, these young men, and holding her own. So it's possible. You just have to be willing to accept that when you go in as a female, that the amount of time you're gonna have to dedicate to ensure that you do the right thing and that you come home to your family.
Yeah, I mean, like Mike's, from Copville. His wife JoJo's a copper.
Yeah.
And I've seen some videos of her. She takes the job seriously. She's training all the time. She looks like she can really handle herself. And she would. That I use her as an example right now. I think she could do the job absolutely.
Yeah, no, and that's what I mean. Like, I just think it comes down to, do you take pride in yourself or not? And if you don't, I wouldn't want you, male or female, to be my backup, because then I don't want you to be a liability. I'd rather handle it. At least I know that I'm the situation. It's not an unknown where my backup is a liability in this situation.
Yeah.
If you had to give any advice to new cops coming into the profession, what would that be?
I would, absolutely do your research, because every department is different. So it's like guys that want to, you gotta really think, okay, where am I going to be 10 years from now if I'm working for this department? I'm working for a 20-man department. The chances of getting promoted are zero, because somebody's got to die or retire to move up the ladder. They have no specialized units. You have guys that, hey, I really like to be, he loves boating. I'd like to be a Marine Patrol officer. Well, at where I worked at BSO, they had helicopters, they had motorcycles, they had boats, canine. They had every single unit you could think of in police work, they had at that department. So do your research, because if you want to be down the road, you want to be a Marine Patrol unit, you got to go to that agency that has it. So you got to do your research, and you want to be able to have a career, not a job. So that's my advice. I looked for a career. I knew that I was in it for the long run. I'm not going to go from agency to agency to agency, because number one, if you're not in the state retirement system, you're starting all over again with your pension. Look, as a cop, I'm never going to be rich. That's another thing you have to say. I'm not going to be rich. I just want to be comfortable. I'm comfortable. I worked 31 years. I have a nice pension. I collect Social Security. I work a part-time gig, working with dogs, training dogs, and playing with dogs and stuff. And I do that for fun.
Yeah, I love that.
But I'm comfortable. I don't have to worry that I can't make my mortgage payment or I can't make my car payment. I live comfortably. I put a roof over my head. I put my son through college. I put food on the table. That's what makes me happy, taking care of my family.
I love it. Yeah, I think a couple of things you said there. I think that sometimes cops get in the situation. I mean, maybe it's society, but I've noticed where cops live outside their means. So that also causes some stress, which is unnecessary. And also, when it comes to, I forgot what I was gonna say, so I'm gonna cut that out. Like, what was I gonna say? Oh,
Well, above your means, and I'll give you an example. I know a lot of cops that depend, they'll go buy a fancy car because they're working a lot of details or they're working a lot of overtime. When I worked at the airport, there was a ton of overtime available for a few years, but then the overtime dried up. So I always said to my wife, we got to live on my regular paycheck.
I say the
If
same shit.
if I'm making an overtime check, that's for fun, for us to take a vacation, or we could save for, like, I have a boat now, so I want to buy a boat. So, that's what I do now for relaxation. So those are the things that the overtime or the details were for. Live within your means, because if the overtime and the details dry up, I can still make my mortgage payment, still make my car payment, still make my insurance payment, but I might not have extra money to take a 2-week vacation.
Right.
So
No, yeah, I've always said the same thing to my wife. Like that's how, I wanted on the very base salary that we make, and that's how we're gonna live. Anything extra, we'll put it into investments or keep it for vacation or whatever. You talked about like flip flopping agencies and stuff. I think right now in their current climate, there's so many agencies hiring that you can find an agency that's gonna match your policing philosophy. If you want to be the cop that is very community oriented and not going out there and arresting bad guys, and that's what you want, I'm sure you can find an agency. If you want to find an agency that supports proactivity and you want to go arrest bad guys, there's going to be an agency that you can find too. So I think that you have to look at it going in. Whatever you think policing is, just make sure that agency matches it, and I think you will have a very prosperous career, and it's not going to feel like going to work.
But I know guys that have gone from agency to agency to agency. It's like they're not happy. They go to another agency, and they've been to 3 different agencies, and each agency has their own pension plan, so now you're not really vested in one and you're vested in the other, and it makes it hard when you go to retire. You got to think of that stuff.
I completely agree. And I think that, again, making those decisions adds unnecessary stress in your life when you're already dealing with a very stressful profession, and it's unnecessary if you just think about things and make the right decisions at the right times and not necessarily impulsively make decisions.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to work for a big agency. That, I wanted to work for an agency that has every, division that you could think of, because it gives you something to look forward to. I mean, I could not have been on road patrol my whole career. It would have driven me nuts, but I got to be, in 4 different districts. I got to be a set team sergeant, a CI sergeant, a detective, work at an airport. So I had a very varied career, and it made it interesting. And it kept me, like, once you get transferred again, it's like you start all over again, and it gives you like a boost to go out and do the job again.
Yeah, it's something it's probably a challenge because it's something new that you want to be good at or have some success in. So it's I guess motivational by being able to go to different divisions. Yeah, I wanted to be at my agency. I was an idiot in my early years, and I did some dumb things, but I ended up applying and getting it hired at my agency after the 4th time. But in between that, I was like, well, I'm going to apply. I probably applied at 50 different departments, and it took me 4 times at my agency. And that was in 2007, 2008, when I was showing up at testings, and they're like, oh, we're hiring 1, and there's 112 people here. I was like, oh, yeah. Me as a 21-year-old kid, I'm like, I just did it and prided myself to give me the experience going forward. And eventually when I got hired, it's because I kind of been through every testing process you could probably put me through.
So if you think about it, I went through only 2 applications, and they were both at BSO, because I went to, in 77, I applied to the Broward Sheriff's Office, was accepted. And then in 86, I went to the Broward Sheriff's Office, got accepted. Well, I went to Coral Springs for 2 years. That was my retirement job, just to be a school resource officer for a couple of years. And I applied to them and got the job. So they were looking for guys like me, retired, not totally retired, but a guy that was a little older that wanted to be a school resource officer.
No, that makes sense. I don't think that's a bad way to go out. especially if you still have the capabilities, because if something bad was to happen,
Yeah.
in that situation, I would trust you with the kids compared to some of the SROs I've seen.
Yeah.
We've been at this for an hour and a half. I try to keep it to an hour.
Okay.
Is there anything that you want to add? We always end with one question, so I'm going to give you a moment to talk, and then I'll ask a question if you have anything.
Well, I just want to thank everybody that's shown support, and I just really enjoy doing these podcasts, and I plan on doing a few more. And there's going to be an event in Miami on the 16th of August that I'm going to attend. I'll be the guest of Counterculture, and I think we'll have a good time.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that I'm not going to be able to make that one, but maybe I can get you up here near Chicago in October or something.
All right. Well, I hope it won't be too cold yet.
That's what I told him. I said we should do it sooner because it could be really cold or it could be nice, but it's a crapshoot. But the question we ask every guest is, we teach for a company called Justice Academy. What is your definition of justice?
My definition of justice is, I guess, just fair, just a fair way of doing things. Justice is not always, I guess what the lady that has the scales, the scales of justice. Sometimes they lean one way, sometimes they lean the other way. But, hopefully if you have to deal with a justice system, that you have a fair shake.
I like it. I like people when they make the analogy to the lady of justice or whatever she's referred to.
The scales of justice.
There it is. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. And then she's blind for a reason because she doesn't know. She's just weighing. Yeah, so
that's right.
I love that analogy.
But it's not fair all the time.
Is it? Yeah. I mean, I agree. But theoretically, it should be.
Yeah.
Well, it has been an honor. I'm truly humbled that you were on my podcast. And I don't know, if you ever want to do one again, we'll have you on again. We'll talk about other stuff because it's so easy to talk to you.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's I'm retired now, so this is just me to keep my finger in the pulse a little.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I wish more retired guys would do it because I love hearing the old stories. I love hearing the same type of trials and tribulations that have been there generationally, and we don't, as active cops, look at it like, oh, this profession is bad because of this, when generationally everyone's been dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, and
Okay.
then I'll talk to you soon. I appreciate it again.
Okay, thank you.